Socrates says, but Euthyphro, you've only gone around in a circle and haven't explained piety at all. Excuse me, I gotta go now. Remember, because at the very beginning, Euthyphro is all very arrogant, very confident, very cocksure, and says, I know what piety is. Just sit down at my feet, Socrates. Listen to me. I'm the master on this. And he presents himself as being an authority on this. Turns out that wasn't right. We all knew it along, but this is where we are now. But I want to now, through these couple, we'll get to definition 5 here in a minute, but through the next couple of slideshows, I want to examine Euthyphro's attitude through this whole thing. We looked at his confusion earlier, and that was illuminating. And we saw that confusion appears in some other dialogues. And it's a really key component, a factor here that's making a significant difference. But I also want to look at Euthyphro's attitude, okay? And I think that we can extrapolate from this example to think about modern day examples as well. So right here I say, since the beginning, Euthyphro has been vain, self-assured, etc. He's not humble. He claims he knows what piety is, whereas Socrates doesn't. That is, he's supposing that he's smarter or wiser than Socrates. Now, again, like I said, Socrates is right about to have his trial at the end of his life to be convicted and executed. So this is peak Socrates. He's in his prime. He's an old man. And for somebody so wise coming down through all the centuries to us, and we still venerate Socrates as being one of the wisest men to ever live, here comes along this young buck Euthyphro who thinks he's wiser and smarter than Socrates. I mean, think of the arrogance, right? And then finally right here, he's overconfident also that his father is guilty of murder. Now, if you weren't here for the setup, this is why Socrates and Euthyphro are talking to begin with, because, again, Socrates is about to go into the court. Euthyphro is also there to go into the court, and he's there to charge his father with murder. But when we looked at the details of the situation, as they appear to us in the Euthyphro dialogue, they're at best that could have been something like negligent homicide, and in any case, like, why would you be dragging your father to court for murder, like premeditation? It just like didn't fit the facts. But despite that, Euthyphro's very confident. So we see him kind of erring intellectually there as well. At the top, he's so vain or prideful that he's blind to see that Socrates is buttering him up and stroking his ego. So I excerted some dialogue here. Socrates says, "You obviously know, since you say that you of all men have the best knowledge of the divine." Euthyphro says, "I'm telling you the truth, Socrates." Euthyphro also makes excuses. "I told you a short while ago, Socrates, that it's a considerable task to whatever it was to do. Like, he just couldn't do it for some reason." But again, he was the expert, right? These intellectual and argumentative shortcomings tell us a lot about Euthyphro's character. His character, not his character in the play character, but his moral character. There are some failings here, some shortcomings here. He's not his best. And especially when compared and set up right against Socrates, this is pretty obvious. And it's pretty a little bit sad that for all of history, we will remember this little guy, Euthyphro, this way. But as you can see here in the second point, character and virtue actually is really important for critical thinking and dialoguing with others. I don't think people understand this as they should. Like, you want to think that your intellect and your morals are kind of separate. Like, you can be a complete menace to people online and a jerk to people and be really smart. Like, those are different, but you end up looking like an idiot yourself, And so we can see here, Euthyphro, his lack of virtue is actually his arrogance, his overconfidence, his lack of humility. All of that is creating problems for his intellect. He can't see the truth via rationality because of his character problems. So I think this is a beautiful lesson that we should probably remember. Back to Euthyphro's actual character. So Euthyphro stated, this is the illustrative, descriptive wording I was talking about. Euthyphro stated that Socrates' statements did not stay put, like the statues of Socrates' ancestor, Daedalus. And so I don't know. I'm not familiar with that story, but everybody's got Google. You can look it up. Not everybody, but if you're on here, you've got Google. But for whatever reason, these statues were said to move around, and he wanted to reference that. It's almost like a pop culture reference to like Breaking Bad or something like something that people would know at the time. But notice Socrates' response. He says that he responded he could move other people's statements around. So this sounds like Socrates is admitting to manipulating the discussion. It sounds like Socrates is like, yep, I've been playing with you. And so I wonder what you guys think about this. Because is this good or is this bad? Because some people will criticize, some scholars will criticize Socrates here and be like, well, I mean, it's kind of a revisionist take on this. They'll say, look, Socrates was no better than the people he was talking to. They'll kind of criticize Socrates to be like, he was a jerk. He just wanted to toy with people and be, they're just his little playthings and for his own entertainment. But the classical take on Socrates that they're responding to and they're saying is wrong. The classical take, is that Socrates was a virtuous person and he's not toying with them, but he's actually, trying to seek the truth. Now that's the take that I go for. I think that Socrates is not just toying with Euthyphro here. I think he's actually trying to get to the truth. And I'm going to point out a couple of pieces of evidence for that. So Socrates does acknowledge, yeah, I can move other people's statements around and toy with them, right? Now, as I say, the next bullet point, number 3, Socrates does control the discussion by making Euthyphro agree to statements that will get him in trouble. And you might think, well, what a jerk. But on the other hand, Euthyphro could have denied any of those statements and saved several of his accounts. He could have saved himself some embarrassment. He could have said, no. But again, this goes back to Euthyphro's own character and his attitude of being overly confident. Maybe we can chalk it up maybe to Euthyphro being rushed. Maybe he wasn't very careful. I experience this sometimes, in my own responding to my own comments online. I'll say something that I wasn't fully in concentration for or something. And I'll come back later and I'm like, crap, I'm rereading it again, or somebody points out some flaw and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Something like that. So, maybe he was rushed. Maybe he didn't have his full attention given to these issues. But it is true that Socrates, he is open about this and he leads him to things, but Euthyphro had the freedom at any point to deny what was being claimed and also to control. We said that Socrates controls the discussion in point 3, but here's the last line. To control a discussion is not necessarily to manipulate the person in the discussion. Like, just think about this with me as a teacher. When I teach, either in lecturing or holding class debates, discussions, I control the discussion. That does not mean that I'm manipulating the people in the discussion. Like that's a very much stronger claim, right? You can control things, like you can be like, well, what about this? Well, what about this, right? But notice, so I say here, you can influence the thinking of others through reasoning or by leading by example without necessarily manipulating the outcome. Individuals still have the freedom of choice, and that has to remain sacred. And I think that what we've seen with Socrates is that he honors this freedom of choice. Again, because note that Socrates does let Euthyphro go at the end. He doesn't make him stay and say, hey, you must answer this. He doesn't beat a dead horse. He doesn't, call him a jerk when he leaves, or booyah, gotcha, you're a loser and I win the debate. Nothing like that. He's very respectful, right? And the last point, he always gets Euthyphro's permission on a statement before continuing. So he honors and respects Euthyphro's natural freedom here in a civil discussion, a respectful discussion. And although it is clear that Socrates is the superior intellect here to Euthyphro, I don't think anybody disagrees with that, either reading this in the ancient period, through all of history, or even to now, with the critics that Socrates has now. I don't think people disagree about that. People all acknowledge Socrates was smarter. Socrates doesn't bully him with his intellect. He doesn't name call him. He has a little bit of wit, and some humor in there, of course. But he doesn't bully.